the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll talk about the State House agenda. If you'd like to join the discussion, you can call us at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text us at 717-219-4001. We'll also take questions from PCN's Facebook page submitted earlier. But first, we're joined today by Kim Lyons, editor of the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Thanks for joining us, Kim.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Last week, the Shapiro Administration announced the enactment of automatic voter registration. What exactly is involved in this?
So if you are going to a PennDOT license center, photo license center to renew your license or get a new license, you can now opt in to getting registered to vote. So previously you had to opt in actively. Now the process will be that they'll automatically sort of guide you through the process unless you decide you want to opt out. So it's a little bit of a shift. We've been able to do this for a little while through the motor voter law, which was passed in the 90s, but this makes it more proactive so that it's leaning toward inviting people to vote, to register to vote, rather than, the previous system, which was you had to sort of opt in. It was an option that was available, but not really sort of promoted or you weren't really guided through it automatically like you will be now.
How are lawmakers reacting to this announcement?
Well, Governor Josh Shapiro announced it on voter registration day. And he did it via executive order, which he's done quite a few of those recently. And Republican lawmakers were sort of grumbling about it a little bit, that this should have been done via legislative action. This should have been gone through the legislature. But they haven't really followed through with any, counter to it. What would they have done instead, or what piece of legislation they would have offered instead? So at the moment, it seems to be relatively popular. There's been a lot of talk about this is going to get more people to vote. We're coming into 2024. Obviously, we have elections next month. We're in November. And until 2024, we have this very huge nationally relevant election. So to get more people voting, or to get more people sort of used to the idea of being able to register, I think everyone sees that as a good thing. I think maybe the process is where people are a little wary, but overall, the reaction has been pretty positive.
Did the governor have the authority to enact this initiative without legislative approval?
He does via executive order, but as with any executive order and any executive, the next governor who may be able to undo it. So it's one of those things that if it's going to remain permanent and not just sort of a highlight of Josh Shapiro's administration, it would need to be codified a little more solidly. But at the moment he does, it's a matter of how long it will stay in effect. Should his predecessor decide this isn't something that he or she wants, they could easily undo it via another executive order. So it's one of those things that, yes, it's okay for now, but it may need to be codified to keep it permanent. And so that'll be up to a future legislature, or potentially this legislature, to figure out what that would look like.
Does enactment of this initiative do anything to affect voter trust of the electoral process, as some Republican critics have alleged?
That's the question, right? I think that ultimately letting more people vote is probably a good thing. I think everyone can get on board with that idea. But I think, there's where there are gaps in trust in the electoral process. I don't know that it's necessary in the registration part of things. It's more in the ballot counting. It's more in, how ballots are harvested, how the voting machines work. That's where some of the quote unquote trust issues that have been brought up, I think, really apply. I don't know that the registration part of it is really where people have a problem. That seems to be pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of manipulation that can happen there, really. So I think overall, it's probably not going to contribute one way or the other to major trust concerns as far as security or anything like that.
Is there any expectation that automatic voter registration will affect or benefit one party politically?
No, it's one of those things that if you ask the Democrats, they'll say, well, it might help Republican diehards. If you ask the Republican, they'll say, oh, it's going to help people who are, diehard Democrats. I think it's going to probably help get more people who it hadn't occurred to them to maybe renew their voter registration, that they came here from another state and they are getting their license and now they can register to vote. I think the jury's still out on who it might help one way or the other. I think there's also some question about whether it's going to help turnout. There's a little bit of doubt that it might do that, but there's a lot of sort of evidence on both sides of that argument that yes, it can help turnout, but also, who is going to registering to vote doesn't mean you're actually going to vote, right? So that's the next part, is that making sure the people who actually register show up at the polls. So that's going to require the follow through from both parties, and I think that's where you'll see, the impact, the result. Whoever gets the vote turned out best, whoever has the best, mechanism to get people to actually show up and vote, that's really going to be the determiner. I don't think registering to vote is going to help one party or the other really it's a matter of getting people to the polls, not necessarily getting them to register is just the first step in the process.
The Freedom Caucus has been among the most vocal critics of the governor's initiative. Do you anticipate any formal action from this caucus?
It's always possible. I mean, it seems like they have a lot of other priorities on their plate before they would get around to that. You know, the House is back this week. The Senate is back very soon also. That they've got an awful lot of things they have to get through. It seems to me that this would be a lower priority than some of the other things they have to deal with first. I suppose it's always possible. I have not seen anything thus far. But I think it's one of those things that they may be sitting back to see how popular it is with voters and with people who are registering to vote before they take any action. That's sort of my guess that they'll wait and see how things turn out. If people are really having a hard time doing it, they may jump in and say this is not a good thing. But at the moment, they've got an awful lot of stuff that they have to take care of before they even get around to this. So I would be surprised if they did anything this legislative session to address it.
Kim Lyons, the Pennsylvania Capitol Star, thank you for joining us this morning.
Oh, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back with more of the PCN Capitol Preview right after this.
A huge party is coming, and you're invited. In 2026, America will celebrate 250 years as a nation. Now through 2026, watch PCN for special programming. Join us as we highlight Pennsylvania's contributions to the founding of our nation with Celebrating America's 250th in Pennsylvania. For more information, go to PCNTV.com. PCN is everything Pennsylvania.
Back, our guests today are House Minority Whip Representative Tim O'Neill, a Republican representing parts of Washington County, and House Appropriations Chair Representative Jordan Harris, a Democrat representing parts of Philadelphia. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. The State House returns today. Representative Harris, we'll start with you. What tops your priority list?
Well, we have a lot of work left undone with regards to priorities that we would like to see accomplished in this year's session, and we're coming back to continue to address the issues that we believe are of a top priority. We still have to deal with our state-related universities. That work is still left undone. We still have the fiscal code that we must finish. That work is still left undone. So we're looking forward to continuing to move forward and hopefully can move forward in a collective way to continue to address the issues that are important to Pennsylvanians.
Representative O'Neill, same question to you. Your top priorities for the session?
Yeah, I would actually echo Representative Harris' comments. Look, the fact of the matter is we have an unfinished budget product sitting in the House of Representatives right now with the fiscal code that needs to take top priority. I would also agree around the state-related universities. We need to see some compromise in our approach to how we're handling that. House Republicans have been arguing for transparency and some relief for students in regard to tuition, and I think a compromise to get that done is certainly on the horizon. Look forward to getting to work.
Let's go back to the issue with the state-related universities for a moment. For those that may not have been following along in the intimate details of this, can you talk a little bit more about what some of the specific concerns were when you talk about transparency?
Sure.
And also, this requires a 2/3 vote, so obviously that means your caucus needs to be on board. What specifically do you need to see to feel in support of this initiative?
Yeah. When we talk about college education and higher education, we've seen prices of higher education rise exponentially higher than the rate of inflation over the past decade, 2 decades. And given the inflationary environment that we live in today, it's getting to the point that is unsustainable for students and families across the Commonwealth. The fact of the matter is we're using taxpayer dollars to help fund these organizations, and for that reason, the House Republican Caucus has been arguing that we need to look at more traditional, more consistent tuition freezes, like our PASHE, our state school system, has actually done for the past 2 years. So that's one of our requests, is that these universities take a stronger look at freezing tuition or finding ways to reduce the burden of the consistent increases of tuition over and over and over again. The other piece around transparency is right to know. The state-related universities are actually exempted from the vast majority of the right to know law in the state of Pennsylvania. And the fact that we're giving them literally hundreds of millions of dollars, we don't think that's right at this point. That if they want the state dollars, state taxpayer dollars, then the taxpayer should have access to the information they need to ensure that it's being used effectively. You see that in other schools in other states that are of a similar nature. So, for instance, Penn State University, Ohio's version of Penn State University, Ohio State, it is fully subject to their state's right to know law. That's what we expect here in Pennsylvania.
So I would agree on certain things with Representative O'Neill. And he does tell a story, but he doesn't give you all of the facts of the story. Yes, tuition has continued to go up with regard, or I should say the burden of tuition has gone up for our students. But a lot of that is because previously, the General Assemblies in the past didn't put the money to help us fund our schools at the state related level and at the state system level. So, for folks watching, what happens is this is the cost of the university. This was the cost that we were providing at the state level. When that continues to drop, when we as a state become derelict in our responsibility to help fund these institutions, now all of a sudden the burden is put on the back of the student. So what we've seen, what we had been seeing in the past, is the state's share of funding for our institutions of higher education. We've seen those levels decrease. Now, more recently, we've been trying to bring them back up. But that's what happened. So that's why the burden was so heavy on our students, because the state wasn't putting in the resources. Now, with regards to transparency, I agree with transparency. I just think it's interesting that, my colleague's party controlled the House of Representatives for 12 years. They voted for the state-related budget line item for all 12 of those years. Now, all of a sudden, how the Democrats control the House, and now all of a sudden, we want to compromise, and we need this and we need that to put up votes to fund these schools. Here's what folks need to understand. If this was a priority, it was a priority last year. They could have done it then. They had the majority. They could have done it the year before. Or they could have done it the 10 years prior to that when they had the majority. They didn't. And what students need to understand is this isn't about us or the political gamesmanship. This actually affects parents. You want to talk about tuition freezes. You want to talk about lessening the burden for young people. The fact that Pitt, Temple, Penn State have not gotten their allocation from the state means that every student at all of those universities now has a larger burden. That's not conjecture. That's not hyperbole. It's just numbers. We haven't sent the money, so you're paying for it.
And so that's actually objectively false. The universities themselves set their tuition rates, and there is no direct one-for-one, we give you a state dollar, we reduce tuition by $1. As a matter of fact, the University of Pittsburgh likes to tout quite publicly and quite often how much of their own budgetary items goes to reduce in-state tuition. So it is not a factor of we give the state dollar and your tuition gets reduced for state tuition. The university itself sets the tuition. They have the ability to maintain in-state tuition regardless of whether or not they get the state appropriation from us. It is the university's 100% their entire call on what they're saying. And Representative Harris does bring up a good point. This has been an issue that should have been corrected for years in the past. It absolutely should have. But I will tell you that for whatever reason, I wasn't a part of those conversations in the past. The decision was made to not do it. I am a part of the conversation moving forward, in the things we are concerned about in this environment is inflation, the cost of inflation, the out-of-control cost of inflation, specifically of higher education, and right to know. And a push for right to know around our state-related universities has happened for multiple sessions. It's never, to Representative Harris's point, it's never reached the finish line, but there has been a push. Representative Warner, who's a House Republican, has had a right to know law for state-related universities for the past 3 sessions, I believe. And yes, this year we've decided to make it a priority. And part of it is the factor that we're in the minority, and there's in the minority, as Representative Harris certainly understands, there's only so many levers of power that you can pull. And the fact of the matter is we are able to exert some priorities and to get some compromise on situations where we do have an opportunity to do it. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong for standing up for families when it comes to the inflationary costs of education, and there's nothing wrong with standing up for taxpayers when we talk about transparency around how we're spending their literal millions of dollars.
We're taking your questions or comments regarding the state budget and other issues before the General Assembly. Call us at 1-877-PA6-5001 or text us 717-219-4001. Now, Representative Harris, when we first opened the program, you had also mentioned unfinished business with the budget and the fiscal code. For those that may have not been maybe paying total attention, the governor signed a budget bill over the summer. However, the fiscal code needs to be finished. The Senate sent 2 different fiscal code bills over. What should people know about those?
Well, I think what folks should understand is that, we have been willing to come to an agreement for some time, but, coming to an agreement means you have to have a partner that's willing to do that. And we've yet to see that as of this point with our folks over in the Senate. But, we continue to have, conversation. We believe those conversations will be fruitful so that we can get some things done that we agree on. What I tell folks all the time is we all have different perspectives. That's why our folks elected us, and that's fine. But at some point in time, we have to get to a place where you get some of your priorities, we get some of our priorities, and the ones that are left on the table, we look at, handling and dealing another day. But we can't allow things to come to a grinding halt with certain issues that are of the utmost importance to Pennsylvanians. So, we continue to be ready to get some of these things resolved. But we do have principles and we do have values that are important that we believe that our constituents sent us to Harrisburg to do. And what we begin to do is, with our new majority, is invest in families, invest in our children, invest in our education, try to put as much money back into the pockets of people as possible in a very different ways, which is why this issue with the state related is so important to us. I mean, I hear my colleague, we disagree. Hundreds of millions of dollars that go to these universities helps defray the cost upon our young people. That's just how it is. Do the universities ultimately have the decision over where tuition is going to be? Yes. But if you sit in any room with any of the administrators of a university, they're going to look at the bottom line of the finances, and that's how a lot of them dictate whether you're going to increase tuition or not. Making your university so unaffordable that people don't come is just not a good business model. If young people aren't coming to university because it's too expensive, right, they're not coming in this market, in this climate. So the resources that we provide at the state level are the lifeblood for many of these schools. But more importantly, it's the lifeblood to a quality education that we know lifts our folks out of poverty and puts them in the middle class. So, all we're saying is we can address the issues, but now's not the time to be obstructionist, because you had, 10 years, 12 years to do it. And now all of a sudden, now we want to use this as leverage. Our children, their education, the load of a loan should not be political leverage.
Is the unfinished business in the fiscal code an opportunity to renegotiate the budget?
Is that for me? So I think that the challenge we have, certainly it's an opportunity to negotiate and look at priorities across both chambers of the General Assembly. But one of the main issues we have around the fiscal code, and with all due respect, I believe Representative Harris kind of left out of the conversation, which has set up this scenario, is this whole, and my good colleague here kind of highlighted the process. It's all based on trust and compromise throughout the process. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, and I'm certainly not looking at Representative Harris for this, but the fact of the matter is, our governor cut a deal with the Senate Republicans where he went on to national news and publicly supported the key provision, the pass provision in it. And then he pulled the rug out from the Senate Republicans and went back on his deal. That does not foster an environment to get any deal making done in Harrisburg. We trade on our trust that the other person is going to follow through on our word. In the Governor Shapiro flat out pulled the rug out and went completely back on his word with the Senate Republicans. The fact of the matter is there's three primary, and Representative Harris knows this, there's three primary bodies in conducting the negotiation for the budget. It's in this session, it's the House Democrats, it's the Senate Republicans, and it's the governor. Regardless of whether or not, I know there's an argument of whether or not the Senate Democrats had agreed to that particular deal. I think in a lot of people's opinion, that's irrelevant, because the assumption was that the governor made the deal and was therefore going to bring the House Democrats along. Whether or not that was the case is irrelevant. The governor cut the deal. He went back on the deal. He destroyed all trust in getting the process done. That's why we're in the situation we're in. That's why we've had an extended period of time. It was towards the end of July, and before the budget was even sent to the governor's desk. It was the end of August before the fiscal code was passed and sent to the House. And we're sitting here at the end of September now before the House returns to even potentially consider the fiscal code. That was all set up, and the failure of the state government right now was all set up by Governor Shapiro's betrayal of the deal that was cut with the Senate Republicans. That's the scenario we have. Yes, there's an opportunity to move forward, and I think we should absolutely be looking for every opportunity to do that. But that's the reality of the situation we're in.
Representative Harris, what's your perspective on what happened with the budget process and the roll of vouchers?
Well, I think, my colleague just said that, in the budget process, there's three principles. In this cycle, he said it, the governor, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats. The governor, House Democrats, and Senate Republicans. He just said that. And I agree with you, Tim. But you can't say that and then tell a story of only two parties in that is the two parties in that negotiation. You said it was three, but then you try to blame it and say that it was only two. No, House Democrats are a majority in this body, and they have a voice. They have priorities, and we came to the table to negotiate a budget based off of our priorities, based off of our majority. And the governor has delivered on a lot of things that he's talked about over his time of campaigning. He's delivered to make sure that all young people across this Commonwealth, when they go to school, they get free breakfast. Just last week,
Governor Wolf did that.
Governor Shapiro, we just did it in the budget. Just last week, Governor Shapiro also delivered on automatic registration for voting. Governor Shapiro delivered on fixing I-95 with the hardworking men and women of organized labor within a matter of days. I mean, everybody thought it was going to take months to fix I-95. We did it in days. I mean, our governor has continued to deliver for Pennsylvanians. With regards to a budget, he said there were three entities involved. So one of those entities has a perspective, and that's the House Democratic Caucus. Now, I was in those conversations. I was sitting there, and we have a perspective, we have a view, and we have a responsibility, right? I got 102 members, 101, 102 include myself, and we have a responsibility to those members to be their leaders and to be their voice, to be their opinion at the negotiating table, and that's all we were doing, and you know, folks want to, you know, revisit and rehash and tell stories and, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. Our governor has continued to deliver. He's our partner in the legislative process. But the House Democratic Caucus has their own views and opinions on things, and we're going to voice those views and opinions. Now, with regards to the particular issue on education, well, here's what I'll say. You know, the Commonwealth Court has given us a mandate. Okay, it has said, and it was not appealed, so this is the law in this Commonwealth, is that the way we currently do education in the Commonwealth is unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional. I think we need to all pause and stop and understand what that means for the children of the Commonwealth. Our court is saying that the way we educate our children is wrong. It's unconstitutional. It doesn't fall in line with what the framers of our state constitution wanted us to do. So the first requirement of everything that we do in this education space has to be about bringing us into constitutionality. So for us as a majority caucus in this conversation, that has to be first. That doesn't mean it's last. That means that's all. But it has to be first, which is why the House Appropriations Committee and the House Education Committee over the next couple months will take time crisscrossing the Commonwealth, bringing in experts from Pennsylvania and from all over the country to talk to us about how we can get our educational environment into constitutionality and to talk about what the future of education should look like in Pennsylvania. And that's examining everything. District-run schools, that's examining our charter schools, our cyber charters, that's examining all of the options that are currently on the table, EITC, OSTC, disadvantaged school buckets, and also any other future endeavors that people want to look at as far as scholarship opportunities and whatnot. But we have to take a full examination of all of those things because our mandate is to get in line constitutionally because the Commonwealth Court has said that we're not.
We're going to take a phone call. Bill is calling from North Versailles. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've got a question for either one of them or both of them, I guess, regarding some things. The enrollment in the state, I'd like to know, has the state schools, has it decreased through the years?
It is not. Enrollment is falling at both the state system, the PASHE system, as well as state-related universities. Okay,
since the enrollment has been decreasing, have they laid off any of the professors, the instructors, et cetera, any of the teaching staff to help reduce the budgets so the budgets aren't continually going out of line? And then you keep increasing the enrollment for students, but if the enrollment is, you keep increasing the tuition for the students, but if enrollment is going down, you're still maintaining the same level of expenses for the teaching staff. Don't you think that should be addressed and bring it in line with enrollment?
From my perspective, sir, that's really one of the questions at the heart of the question. And the fact of the matter is we don't have that information for the state-related universities that are requesting hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the point about the transparency that we're asking for.
Well, what I would say is that the state system of higher education has gone through reorganizing and restructuring. Out west, you've seen the reorganizing and restructuring of several of our universities to consolidate those universities, to honestly deal with that and to cut costs and to make sure that they're being a good steward of taxpayer dollars. So I would say When you look at our state system universities, they actually have done that. I think Penn West is now one of the what we're calling the campuses that is a conglomeration of several of our universities out there. So I think the state system has done exactly that. Looked at the enrollment, looked at the resources, and is trying to come in line so that they are doing the best with all of our taxpayer dollars.
And if you don't mind, I would agree that the state system, the PASHE system, is doing exactly that. That Chancellor Greenstein has put together a comprehensive plan to rework the entire system. As Representative Harris has indicated, that includes Out My Way, really a combination of three of the schools, I believe is Edinburgh, Clarion, and California in my home of Washington County, and combine them into Penn West. That is the effort that the state system, the PASHE system, which are all 100% owned by the state, has gone through that analysis and that process to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. We simply don't know. We don't have the information. We don't have access to the information when we talk about the state-related universities and whether or not they're going through that process at all. That is what I highlighted earlier about really the crux of the transparency problem as we move forward.
We'll continue our discussion in just a moment, but first I'd like to look at some upcoming programming on PCN. Join us for the Capitol All-Stars softball doubleheader game. Once a year, State, House, and Senate lawmakers come together for a bipartisan charity ball game. That's live tonight starting at 5, available on cable or stream free with PCN Select. Join us for a double dose of On the Issues this week as we discuss sexual predator sting operations with Representative Jim Gregory and open primary legislation with Representative Jared Solomon. That's Wednesday night starting at 6 p.m. This Thursday, Journalists Roundtable will review unfinished business in the state budget, proposed changes to Pennsylvania's election law, and the 2024 U.S. Senate race. We'll be joined by Justin Schweitzer with City and State PA, Charles McElwee of Real Clear, Pennsylvania, and Katie Meyer from Spotlight, PA. That's Thursday night at 6 o'clock. All the great public affairs, event coverage, and interviews that you watch at PCN are now available for free online at PCNTV.com and on PCN Select. And if you like what you see on PCN, thank your local cable provider. They carry PCN on their channel lineup as a public service. We receive no state or federal tax dollars. And just a reminder to viewers, if you have any comments or questions for our guest on upcoming issues within the State House, please give us a call, 1-877-PA6-5001, or text us 717-219-4001. Now, we were talking about the state budget. I'd like to revisit the issue of vouchers for just a moment. Representative Harris, there are several lawmakers, particularly hailing from Philadelphia, that are in opposition of vouchers, yet their students may be among those who would most benefit from them. Can you explain the reasons for opposition?
I think you would have to talk to those members about what their perspective are. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouths. I think I've said this before, we have a mandate to do something, but we have a mandate to do something for all children and not just a few. And that there are many, and I've said this personally, there are many tools in the educational toolbox, and we should look and examine all of those tools. But this is actually, in my view, when it comes to public education, and I am a former school teacher, I have a master's degree in education. I've stood in front of two students and taught students here in this Commonwealth. I think we're limiting ourselves by just talking about one small part of a whole educational system when the court has said we need to look at the whole educational system. And so for me, what I can say is that now is not the time to be adversarial on the issue of education. It is the time to be visionary. It's the time to be inspirational and aspirational about what we could do as a Commonwealth with regards to our children. We have resources at the state level that we should be investing in our schools. And to the viewers listening at home, when you want to talk, I know people always talk about property tax, but one of the reasons why property taxes have continued to go up across this Commonwealth in many places is because we have not done our job at the state level with regards to the funding of our school systems. Not my words, Commonwealth Court's words, right? So for us, for me, what I could say is that, now's the time to kind of reimagine, what does education look like and what should it look like? What is that number that we need to invest to ensure that all of our children, regardless of their zip code, get a quality education? And what are all of the tools that we need to use to ensure that that happens? And how do we have you talked about transparency. How do we have transparency? What I can tell you is that some of the tools that we're using now, there is no transparency with those tools. So we need to look at all of that. But this doesn't have to be it. We shouldn't have to argue about that. What we should be doing is sitting at the table and discussing what all of those things look like and how do we deliver education to all of our young people, understanding that all of our young people learn differently. They learn differently and in different environments and all of the likes. That's what we should be looking at. And that's something that I want us to have a significant conversation with and not just rush and ram anything through, but let's actually get to the crux of what we should be doing with regards to public education here in the Commonwealth. Again, it doesn't have to be and it shouldn't be adversarial. We all have different opinions. I agree and I get that. But I think we all have to reckon with what the court has said about what we're not doing at the state level when it comes to our children. I think just focusing and looking at this one small part of this whole, that one small part is not going to fix everything. And here's the other thing. As an educator, I'll tell you that money alone won't fix public education. Let me be clear. I'm telling you, I'm a Democrat, majority appropriations chairman. I'm going to look directly in the camera and I'll tell you, money alone is not going to fix this problem, which is why we have to have the robust, and do the robust conversation, have the work done now about a whole lot of other things. That includes teacher preparation, teacher pipelines. That includes mental health. That includes special education. That includes school facilities. All of that has to be a part of this conversation if we're going to get education right for our children. And we do a disservice if we just deal with one thing and not really look at the whole thing.
Representative O'Neill, what would your caucus like to see come out of these Basic Education Funding Commission hearings?
I'll tell you, every once in a while there is an opportunity for a Republican and Democrat to agree. And this is it. I actually agree with a lot of what Representative Harris just said. This court case in the decision by the Commonwealth Court has provided us with a wonderful opportunity to look at our entire system and evaluate every aspect of it, put everything on the table to determine what's working and what's not, and ultimately come out with what is best for our students moving forward in the Commonwealth. But I would agree, all options need to be on the table. House Republicans, we believe in a strong, all of the above approach to education. That means, yes, we should absolutely be considering vouchers. Yes, we should absolutely be supporting charters. Yes, we should absolutely be looking in supporting cyber charters, but ensuring they're doing it in a quality manner. But 100%, yes, we need to be supporting traditional public schools as well to ensure that regardless of whatever the parent's choice is and whatever fits appropriately for that individual student, we have a strong quality education out of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's what I believe the Commonwealth Court decision is really getting at the heart of. And regardless of zip code, that should be true as well. Whether you live in inner city Philadelphia, you live in Washington County, or you live in Elk County, you should have the same educational opportunity, high quality education, regardless of the educational environment you find yourself in. That's what we have the opportunity through this commission to do. I'm actually encouraged by Representative Harris's words here that he has a very similar perspective. Of course, we're going to disagree on exactly how to get there, but that's what the process is about. It is a wonderful opportunity to ensure that we're doing it right here in Pennsylvania.
I want to differentiate because I don't want people to be confused. The BEFC is the Basic Education Funding Commission, and they are doing the funding work. House Appropriations and House Education Committee are doing tours throughout the state, and we're focused on not just funding, but all of the other things as well. So there are two different things happening simultaneously. The work that the Appropriations Committee is going to be doing with the Education Committee is actually talking about what I just said and what Representative O'Neill agreed with, is that we have to look at everything and make sure that we are doing right by every mode of how education is being delivered to our young people. And that's why, this should be an exciting time for us, because it really gives us the chance to look at what we're doing, analyze what we're doing, bring different folks in to give their expert opinion. Like, I'm a policy nerd, right? So I like to look at, what does your data say? Like, for example, what's the best way to help close the education gap for students from single-parent households? What's the best way to close education gaps for students who are from a certain socioeconomic level? What's the best way to close education gap for our Black and Latino students? What's the best way to close the education gap for students from white students from rural Pennsylvania? Anybody know the answer? Nobody? Exactly. That's why you bring experts to the table to show you what the methodology is and what has been shown to be successful. I've traveled this Commonwealth, and what I can tell you is a lot of the problems that we're having in urban Philadelphia, some of the same problems that some of your school districts are probably having in rural Pennsylvania. When we had a pandemic and we had to send food to our kids so that our kids can eat, lots of rural Pennsylvania school districts were doing the same exact thing because their kids needed food to eat as well. While it may only take my kids 15, 20 minutes to get to school, we have parts of rural Pennsylvania where it takes our kids over an hour to get to school because Pennsylvania is such a vast land. Like, so this, we're not as different in our problems. We may differ in what our solutions should be, but we owe it to every single child in this Commonwealth not to just make, these happenstance decisions, but to bring all of the voices to the table that can show us what is working in other places. I don't know if Representative O'Neill has done it before, but I've gone to the National Conference of State Legislators, and I've gone to their conferences, and I've been at different conferences for state legislators and looked at all of these different, different states are doing things better than Pennsylvania. We would be foolish not to listen to what those other folks are doing and see how we can incorporate some of those things in Pennsylvania. We got to look at it all in order to make the right decisions for our children.
We have a question via text, I believe on the similar topic. The Commonwealth Court has ruled that Pennsylvania isn't funding education in a constitutional way. What's being done to fix how Pennsylvania funds public education? I believe this goes back to what you were just saying, Representative Harris.
Yeah, I mean, this is what this work is really about. It's about, looking at how we fund schools. But again, and even to your transparency part, I will agree with that on this situation is how are we spending those dollars? And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think sometimes how you spend the dollars is actually as important as how much of it you're spending, right? So that's what these hearings are about, is about understanding that we need to make a significant amount of money, invest a significant amount of money into the education of our Commonwealth. But let me say, what is a failure? A failure in this moment is for Representative O'Neill and myself and all of our colleagues to sit around 10 years from now, having invested tens of billions of more dollars into our system and getting the same outcome for our children. That is a failure of our responsibility if we do that, which is why we have to take a significant look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, to make sure that we're doing it the right way and directing resources in the right area. Now is the time, and many of my folks, we already knew that we weren't doing it correctly. We didn't need a court ruling, but now that we have this court ruling, and I don't want to be partisan, but it was a Republican judge. This is a Republican judge who said this, right? This is the time for us to have the tough conversations. That, like I said, doesn't have to be adversarial, but it has to be right. Because we have to stand on the side of righteousness by doing what is right for each and every child in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
We only have a couple of minutes left. There are a lot of issues before the State House, so I'm going to do kind of open up Pandora's box and open up a speed round of just a couple of issues and get you to comment briefly on them. Representative Harris, you've been an advocate for Pennsylvania's Clean Slate law. You're looking to expand it. What would the expansion do? The
expansion of Clean Slate, which is over in the Senate, we passed it out of the House in an overwhelmingly bipartisan fashion. I think it was like 187 votes that passed Clean. Did you vote for Clean Slate?
I believe I did.
Oh, all right. I'm about to say, but no. Clean Slate in Pennsylvania has been extremely successful. More than 40 million records have been sealed. We've helped more than 1 million Pennsylvanians. And what Clean Slate, that the version that's over in the Senate would do, would expand it to our low-level felonies that include a lot of our drug felonies that many of our brothers and sisters have accumulated because of addiction, right? So this really goes further in how we can help people get a clean slate and take them from what I say from tax burden to taxpayer and give folks the real second chance that they deserve. These are folks who deserve it. These are folks who have proven that they deserve it, and I think that's why you've seen such a bipartisan shift on that. Shout out to my partner in reform, Representative Cheryl Delosier, who told me she would never do felonies when we first started this work, and now has seen the light that we can help so many more people. So that is something I think is extremely important, and it's a Democrat and Republican issue.
Next topic, very briefly, the governor's administration enacted automatic voter registration last week. Members of the Freedom Caucus voiced opposition to this. Representative O'Neill, do you anticipate any action from members of your caucus in response to this activity?
Yeah, a number of members of our caucus have already publicly said, put out positions on it. When it comes down to it, the House Republican Caucus absolutely supports all eligible voters being able to register and go out and cast their ballot. But we have two major issues. So for anybody that's not aware, so the motor voter law is a federal law, which was later, after passed by Congress, was later enacted by Pennsylvania, passed a law to establish it. But there's really two issues we have with motor voter. Number one is right around the time that I was elected, there was plenty of news stories throughout the Commonwealth about the failures of motor voters, where there was actually upwards of 11,000 ineligible voters registered to vote on our voter rolls because of failures through our motor voter system. So I don't know that there's a lot of confidence through the current system that true vetting for eligible voters is actually occurring. The second part, and I would argue the biggest part, is our Constitution says that the General Assembly, state legislatures alone have the authority to establish the time, place, and method for voting to include voter registration. And when it comes down to it, whether it's a good idea or not, it's fundamentally irrelevant when it comes to governor executive action. He simply does not have the authority to make changes regarding our voting laws on his own. That is an action of the General Assembly. That is something that is appropriately debated amongst the halls of the General Assembly. And in the event that the General Assembly comes to consensus and sends the governor a piece of legislation, he would then have the ability to weigh in through either veto or signature. That is his role in establishing elections. And the fact of the matter is, he does not have the authority to do what he did. And if the House, I don't know yet whether or not the House Republicans in particular will take specific action. But if we do, it'll be on the grounds of executive overreach in the fact that the governor does not have the authority to do what he did.
Just about out of time. Representative Harris, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
I think we should be in the business of opening up our elections to as many people as possible who are eligible voters, right? And I think what the governor did just that. We have many safeguards in place in how we administer our elections. We have seen countless number of folks who have reviewed our elections have said that there was minimal to no fraud that's happened. And, you know, what the governor did is really about making sure that more people have their voice heard at the ballot box on Election Day. That's it.
Representative Harris, Representative O'Neill, gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. PCN's Larry Casper spoke with Representative Kristin Marcell about animal tranquilizer abuse.
What are the names used most often to refer to this abused animal tranquilizer, Representative? How do we recognize it?
So the common term that is used to speak about this is xylazine, which is an animal tranquilizer. It is more commonly referred to more from a slang perspective as tranq.
And just how big is this problem of the abuse of this drug?
Unfortunately, it's pretty persistent. Not only are half of all Pennsylvania counties seeing cases where xylazine has caused a death here in Pennsylvania, but we also know that within Philadelphia, 90% of all of the drugs that are being tested show a presence of xylazine.
Now, we know that the addition of fentanyl to the mix can make this drug deadly. So why add fentanyl to this drug anyway on the street?
So what we're seeing is that whether it's fentanyl or xylazine, there are a number of these street drugs that are sometimes present in opioids, other things. Someone may not even know that it's present. And so that's really the danger, is that there are a number of people potentially using a street drug and would not even know that this is present, and then may have some health effects as a result of it.
Well, tell me about some of those health effects, Representative. In other words, what are the consequences of mixing this animal tranquilizer with deadly fentanyl?
So I actually have a constituent who is a recovered addict who came to me months ago to share some of the experiences that she has had, because she tries to help others in the area and also in Kensington to recover from addiction. She shared with me that what she has seen is that there are, unfortunately, when you have xylazine in your system, you can have wounds that need to be treated. And if they are not treated, they can turn into something like gangrene, which would result in someone either having to have an amputation or potentially, could die from that. And so it's really becoming much of a health scare within our area.
How did this form of abuse come to your attention initially?
Initially, I was meeting with a constituent in my office, and she shared with me that this was a problem she was seeing because she, as a recovered addict, is now trying to help others. And she said to me, "Hey, Kristin, you really should know about the dangers that are occurring in our region and what I'm seeing down in Philadelphia." And when I went into our bill database, I noticed that there was nothing on this particular issue. And after hearing about the problem that exists, it seemed like that we needed to move forward and get something done to help the people suffering or potential maybe suffering in the future.
So geographically, where are the hot spots in Pennsylvania where this form of abuse can be found? You already mentioned Philadelphia.
So yes, so Philadelphia, I would say Philadelphia is a huge problem, but there are a number of counties throughout the Commonwealth that are having problems. I think some are more pronounced than others, and there are a number of counties that have taken action within this area. But I think most people, when they see the videos, are thinking probably of Philadelphia and Kensington, but it's not the only area that has this issue.
What does your bill do to increase the awareness of the abuse of this animal tranquilizer? Just what's in your bill exactly?
So we really, in my bill, we're trying to make sure that people understand that xylazine may be present in drugs. And so everyone, for the most part, everyone knows someone who's been affected by the opioid epidemic. And so my bill is really trying to help make sure that people know about the dangers of xylazine because of it being present in drugs where people may not know. So it could be that our education effort is targeted towards families, it could be targeted towards hospitals, it could be targeted towards healthcare professionals or veterinarians. There are a number of different areas through DDAP that the program would build awareness through.
Now, your bill is one of several that's aimed at the abuse of certain drugs. Can you give us just the broad strokes on basically what those other bills are about and how they might connect with yours?
I'd love to do that. So there's a package of 5 bills, but it's really a starting point. We've offered to anyone who's interested in working on this issue to join with us and try to look at some additional areas as well. One is that we focus on education through my bill, trying to build awareness and trying to prevent things from happening in the future. Secondly, we really want action. So particularly the bill that creates a statewide opioid task force. That is something that is hoping to disrupt the trafficking and to try to deal with this urgent problem right now. And then finally, we're trying to get ahead of the next street drug, the next trend that might be occurring. And that would be through the faster identification of emerging street drugs. And so really, those are the 3 main areas that we're trying to target. And I would also tell you that in the future, we're going to focus on recovery and trying to see how we can help to recover more people and help them to get through these issues.
Representative Kristin Marcell, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That concludes today's show. Join us for a double dose of On the Issues tomorrow as we discuss sexual predator sting operations with Representative Jim Gregory and open primary legislation with Representative Jared Solomon. That's Wednesday night starting at 6 p.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.